Hi, I'm Madison Lundquist, APQC's Principal Research Lead for Process and Performance Management, and I'm joined today by Maggie, one of our upcoming speakers for the 2024 conference. Welcome, Maggie.
Hi, welcome, Maddie. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Why don't you start with just telling us a little bit about your role at your organization and tell us a little bit about what you do so we have that as a foundation before we jump in.
Of course. As Maddie mentioned, I'm Maggie and I'm the Knowledge Management Specialist at Kraton Corporation. So, we are a fairly new KM program. We just officially started it back in 2021, but we've had a lot of progress since then. Our program is right now only in our R&D department, so it is not corporate wide. I just wanted to put that in there just because it is possible for people to have KM programs in their departments to start out, and then it can always grow. But our main focus really is about knowledge capture and sharing. So we have a lot of experts that have been with the company for a significant amount of time. So we really want to try to focus on capturing that knowledge before they retire or leave the company. And so we've done a lot of that, and now we're starting to advance into more other areas as well.
Awesome. Thanks for that. So we'll jump into some questions I have for you. Let's start with, what are the three most important soft skills for professionals and why?
So that's a really tough question. I thought a lot about this. And it was really hard, honestly, to narrow it down to three just because professionals is such a broad range.
Yeah.
So I went with the very basic professional that it would be pertinent to any professional, no matter what industry or anything. And the three that I came up with: communication, number one, obviously, everybody needs to know how to communicate. Also, time management. Everybody is usually in today's world overworked sometimes or has a lot on their plate, so you got to be able to manage your workload effectively. And then also adaptability, because everything's changing. It's just this time, I guess. I don't know if it's still a lot of COVID with things transitioning, but just the corporate world in general, it seems like something always happens to where things change or we're trying to continuously improve, etc. So we always have to be ready to adapt to those changes.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I had never really thought of adaptability before, but I think that is so important for professionals. And you talk about the changing environment, and I think COVID just showed everyone how much we can change in a short amount of time. And so
Yes.
now employers just expect us to continuously change quickly. So I really like that one.
Yeah.
Do you see any difference in terms of what skills are more important for, say, the process performance management area versus knowledge management professionals?
So I would say that there's a lot of similarities between the two, but definitely there can be, as far as importance level goes, a little bit of difference. For knowledge management, for example, the communication is huge, just like it is in process, but active listening, I think, is super important for knowledge management because we're serving our customers, whether it be internal, our own coworkers, or external. So there's just a little bit of difference there. Another one that I think is really important for KM is collaboration and relationship building. So you have to have a lot of forefront communication with people to build that rapport, because a lot of times KM is very new. Even though we share knowledge all the time, people don't really think of it as knowledge management. So we really have to get that buy-in in that change management phase. So that's kind of how we need to do that, so we can do the rest of the things that we need to do. Those are all applicable for process management as well, but attention to detail is something, as well as problem solving, that I think is crucial to be able to continuously improve those processes and refine the various processes that always exist.
Yeah, no, I love the way you divided those up. What skills do you see as maybe not as important now, but with generative AI, automation, all these things coming into the workforce, some have been here a while, some are new. What do you see maybe in terms of skills that will be important for the next 6 to 18 months?
Yeah, so that's a really tough question. It took me quite a while to even think of one, honestly. But I came up with one, and it was something I personally struggled with a little bit, and I'm still not the greatest at. And it goes back to communication, but it's targeted directly to like large language model, the Gen AI, etc. Is prompt writing. So you can't just, always type how you would type in Google or whatever, however you might think you need to type. kind of a learned skill, I guess, that you need to develop, or maybe I'm just not good at it. I don't know. Um, but I tried Copilot a little bit. With Power Automate, you could do some things, and what I was typing in the prompt, it was not registering. So I was like, that's something with AI becoming very big, very quick. Companies aren't necessarily prepared for it. So I feel like they really need to get their employees to understand and have that written communication of how to correspond with AI.
Is that something that you have any resources or particular things you're doing to improve that skill for yourself, or any guidance you could give to people trying to improve it?
Yeah, so I haven't spent a lot of time on that yet, but a lot of what I've been doing is just looking at various articles on LinkedIn and other places, just following a lot of different companies, whether they be tech companies themselves or other companies that are using tech companies, of, what's the best way to do this. And just learning more about AI in general is also helpful. So I just find any resources. I also like to look at the SIKM community that some of you may or may not be aware of, but it's a really great knowledge management resource. It's free to join. You can ask questions, but I also like to just read through the different threads to learn more. There's always a lot of AI questions in there, a lot of great advice.
I'm sure AI is a hot topic for a lot of people right
Yes.
now. When you're talking about people skills, where do you maybe see the most resistance when trying to improve those skills?
I think a lot of the resistance is just around the simple fact that it's usually somewhat difficult to improve those skills. It's not like project management or learning how to use a piece of equipment. It's more, I don't want to say you're born with it or you're not, because you can always develop those skills, but it's a lot more difficult to practice some different things. If you're a really great organizer, or if you're not a great organizer trying to be one, it's not a simple process. It takes a lot of effort, and I think sometimes people don't have the time and the resources to put in what it takes to really hone in on those skills that are needed. It's not as easy as some of the other skills would be.
Do you find one method that works better over the other? I know I'm sure it depends on the person's learning style, if they prefer a mentor or self-paced learning, but are there particular avenues you typically send people down?
Yeah, so it does depend on that person for sure. But I feel like what has worked well in my experience with the people that I've worked with is really kind of that mentor, especially with communication and collaboration. There's a lot of things where you just kind of need to help coach. You make different scenarios and you kind of just walk back and forth through them to practice. Or if it's written communication, you can say, hey, why don't you write this? So it's always practicing it, and it's not just here, read this article or read this book, because those things happen too, but it's how can you apply that after the fact that really helps set people forward with being able to improve on those skills.
So we've talked a lot about knowledge management and process management. How did you yourself evolve into a knowledge management professional?
So it kind of fell in my lap a little bit. So I had been in R&D at Kraton for, well, it'll be almost 11 years in March. So I was in a different role, and a lot of different people were just, hey, can we have some of your time to work on this project or that project? And that's kind of what happened here. They were actually doing a pilot with APQC on elicitation sessions. So they needed a little bit of a part-time resource to test it out to see how well it worked. So I was a part of that, just giving a little bit of my time. And then from there, it just gradually increased. And then the main person, she had left the company. And so we're like, okay, we really like this knowledge management thing. I think we need to do more than just elicitation. Let's, go full force and have an actual dedicated KM person. And then that's where my role came and how I came to be.
That's awesome. We recently did a survey on process professionals, and when we asked professionals how they came into a role in process, I fell into it, or we classified it as by default, was actually a category that a lot of people selected. So
Yeah.
that's quite the journey.
Yes, I don't know too many people that ever say, I want to be a knowledge manager or be in knowledge management. It just seems like they were like, oh, well, it kind of just, fell in my lap or, whatever it might be. But
Yep. Accidental knowledge manager, I've heard too.
yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
You mentioned earlier that you guys are on a KM journey at your organization. What is one piece of advice you would give to other organizations just starting out on their knowledge management journey?
So it might be more than just one. It's hard to narrow it down to one, but I'll narrow it down to two or three.
Okay.
So the first thing is remember it's a journey. So yes, we have been on this journey a couple years now, but the amount of effort and things we need to do are still huge. Like we're nowhere near being, that perfect KM program, or we're not quite to the level 3 yet. We still have a lot of work to do on the KM CAT for your guys' maturity assessment. But just remember it's a journey. Be patient with yourself and with everyone else, your customers, because it takes time. It's a change, so you need to be open to people not always accepting the change or accepting what's happening, because one, they might have done it a different way for how many years. They could be scared. A lot of people now with AI think, oh, well, you were just going to try to take over my job. So we need to remember that it takes time, and we need to be empathetic, which is another skill that is very important in, I think, any professional, but definitely in knowledge management, is that emotional intelligence, is that empathy. We have to understand where the people are coming from to help them get from there to where we want them to go.
Mhm. That's great. I was at an event last week and someone said that processes are human, and that talks to that empathy piece that I think a lot of times we forget. We have this vision of this perfect process improvement and it's going to go great, but then you have to
Right.
remember that there's a person involved in that process.
Yes, 100%. And that's where I like to say perseverance comes in too, because it's not
Yeah.
going to go smoothly. You can't give up if people are, they're like, we're not doing this or whatever the situation might be. You just got to keep going and keep trying, and you'll eventually get there.
Yep, for sure. Well, thank you, Maggie. I was excited to learn a little bit about your session as well as some topics around people skills.
Yes, thanks so much for having me. I can't wait for the conference.
Of course.